Most people who have played through Persona 4 Golden probably have a rough idea for how the Midnight Channel works, or at least you'd think so. But if you were to ask them, I doubt that they would be able to give a detailed account of what it actually portrays through its dungeons without at some point contradicting themselves. So before I talk about the ways that different dungeons inform the characters presented therein, I think it's important to take a look at how the Midnight Channel works and how it's portrayed in this game, which I'll be doing in future videos, so please subscribe, like, comment, as well as share this to other Persona fans where they can see it. Persona 4 Golden is obsessed with the idea of truth. That much is not controversial at all. Understanding and seeking it, and as a central plot point of finding the killer is linked to the murder method, that is, the supernatural TV world, getting a grasp on how it works is an important, albeit not necessary, element of the story and for the player. In the same way that the main cast is constantly fed incorrect ideas about who the suspect could be, or even being wrong multiple times about their own criteria and conclusions of someone being pursued by the killer, it makes sense then that their theories about different things pertaining to the TV world also end up being contradicted repeatedly. One idea is that the people are viewing the Midnight Channel and the events within, something brought up by the cheering of an early dungeon crowd, but due to the fact that no one seems to recognize the protagonist at school afterwards, makes it pretty much dropped by the cast. It's fair to say that the Midnight Channel doesn't go on air the entire time you're inside of it, but does just merely show who the victim is, where they are, and a general idea of them. But what is that idea of them? A secondary view of the dungeons and the shadows within are, of course, the repressed desires, insecurities of the self that is denied by the host's ego, therefore creating a shadow. This is the general understanding of shadows through most of the game, and is mostly how the game presents the characters, albeit not entirely. A second view that is addressed within the game is that after gaining fame on the TV, a shadow is in fact the perverted perception of the masses seeing the host on the television screen, and so it is another yet false version of the self. The shadow is therein not entirely the person's rejected ego, but is in fact partially the creation of the false interpretations of the masses, their perception. It seems obvious at first that the first idea is what defines a shadow and dungeon's action in design, but it is brought up by Teddy once he observes the Midnight Channel for himself that there may be some credence to the second idea more than the first.
Now I know exactly what's happening.
And it's all but confirmed by the Midnight Channel event, where the investigation team falsely believe that they see Namatame's true thoughts expressed on the TV, when in fact it was just the reflection of their view of him, rather than anything replicated from him. It is then driven in again by Adachi, controlled by Ameno Sagiri, and just the Sagiri itself, that the world of shadows, shadows which occupy the subconscious of all mankind's ego, are the ones who make, take, and control the TV world's perceptions, to fit the appeal and interpretation of the masses. Well, if it is the case, though, it seems to undermine the earlier parts of the game, does it not? If you're not clear on what I'm saying. This basically says that our idea of the shadow being this part of ourselves we reject and put down is not actually technically how these are created. Well, I mean, the whole idea was that they were facing themselves, right? The parts of themselves that they denied. If you're telling me now that those parts of themselves weren't even necessarily parts they denied, then it seems kind of inconsistent. If it wasn't a true part of themselves, or the true self as they say, what's the point? Well, this is taking the information a little too plainly as well. You see, there's a common idea that there is the you of your own experiences, and the you as you are perceived through others. No man is an island, as it is said, just a part of the main. You may have your separate identity and who you are, but the who people see you as are also aspects of your identity as well, whether you like it or not. This idea is heavily represented in Persona and popular Japanese media as well. So what is a shadow? A shadow of our characters, at least. Well, they tell you what they are when you fight them. They are a shadow, the true self. But how? Well, our characters, each time they face themselves, are denying the flaws and problems about themselves, but they are also running away from the world that seeks to label them if their insecurity ever got out. It's also mixing that with the interpretation the public may already have of them. In other words, they are the full self, The unchecked personal self without hiding any insecurity or negative traits, combined with the interpretations of the entire general public and the interpretations that could be. They are the truest, fullest possible self. The combination of all perspectives and interpretations. The thing is, though, some interpretations contradict themselves. Some aspects fight with each other. They are incongruous, and that incongruity is because they lack the ability to gain an ego. The ego is talked about a lot, from Naoto's explanation to Teddy's discovery and how he created an ego for himself. An ego, by definition, is the part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious. It's the part that is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. In embracing all interpretations and not reality testing negative traits away, the true self lacks any personal identity, since part of what makes a personal identity is forfeit to the world of the shadow itself. What makes us us in that aspect is the ability to acknowledge how we may be seen or interpreted, the insecure things that we may feel about ourselves, and have the mediative ability to face that true self and take the parts that we want to make the person we want to be. In other words, we can never grow and become our true self if we refuse to face the self as a whole. Facing all of these interpretations allows us to self-analyze and really look at each part of ourselves. What's positive, what's negative, what does exist. But we cannot truly move on or grow past parts of ourselves that we are not willing to face, nor can we just ignore the perceptions of others and pretend like they aren't there. I hope this wasn't too heady. I wouldn't blame you if you needed to rewind or slow it down, but this is fundamentally what is happening in Persona 4 Golden with full clarity as described by the characters and by classic Jungian psychology. And Jungian psychology is the cornerstone of what all of Persona is based on anyways. So, to recap and add more context, the dungeons and the shadows seen on the Midnight Channel are the combination to some extent of the host individual's denied and repressed self, as well as the mass opinions of the people who viewed the hosts on their TV appearances. How and what parts of these selves are the insecurity and personal identity, and which are the wishful interpretations of the masses, are intentionally left somewhat unclear. But if you do the social links for these characters, as well as hear them out in the game and listen to what they have to say, you can form a clear idea of what pieces of them inside the TV was genuine, part of their real selves. You have to, in other words, seek them out and listen to find the truth, which of course lays into the main theme of the game perfectly. I've honestly never seen people go in depth on how the Midnight Channel works, and the effort that the writers put into actively feeding false conclusions to the investigation team that contradict themselves throughout the game and dismiss their own conclusions, it's honestly super interesting and cool. While I don't think it's super important to the central idea to get everything right about the Midnight Channel, I think most people get a general idea even if they don't know the details, it still gets it across. I think finding exactly how the game operates is part of reaching out to the truth, of fulfilling the point of the game. And so now I hope you can see the answer in front of you, without the glasses. Anyways, now that I have organized the way that the Midnight Channel works here, it will be much easier to talk about this aspect without being redundant when I cover the character subjects of these dungeons in future segments. So, if you want to see those future videos covering nearly all major and side characters of Persona 4 Golden, as well as help me get these videos to see more eyes and hopefully have enough money to not be homeless, please leave a like and comment, subscribe, and show this to where Persona fans gather. I also appreciate any donations to keep me financially secure on Patreon, which I have multiple behind-the-scenes material on for this series, and on my Twitch through PayPal at HidingCoon. I'll be uploading regularly here, so please turn on the bell, and I'll see you then.